Good Wednesday evening and welcome to Conversations with the Candidates at Houston Media Source TV. I'm Gene Preuss with the League of Women Voters of Houston, and tonight we are doing some Republican candidates, and we're going to start off with candidates for Harris County Sheriff. We're going to ask some questions. We're going to learn a little bit. We only had one candidate that could make it tonight. We're very happy to have Mr. Paul Day, who is running for Harris County Sheriff. Thank you for joining us tonight, and thank you. I'm going to ask you some questions, and not going to take you off balance here, but we're going to try to get a little bit more information about you because we want our voters to be informed voters so that they can go to the polls and make the best choice for the candidates. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, and thank you very much for giving us this opportunity, because we don't really get this big of an opportunity to reach the multitude, so we're very thankful for this opportunity.
Well, we're very glad to provide it, and you know, we'd always like to have more time, more candidates, but we had a few spaces, and I wanted to get the sheriff because it's an important position.
Yes, it is.
But it's one that you know, we don't think about very often, I don't believe. So I'm going to start off tossing you a softball here. Tell us about yourself and why you're running for Harris County Sheriff.
Well, like you said, my name is Paul Day, and I'm a longtime law enforcement officer. I actually started my career my career of public service in the military during the Vietnam War era. I was in the Army as a sergeant from 1967 to 1969. I was stationed in Washington, D.C. Even though I was in the infantry, I was fortunate enough not to go to Vietnam, but I was there, and I saw the impact of the war because we had to bury a lot of people that came back. We gave them full honor funerals. And I actually was involved in the inaugural parade for Richard Nixon. And I was there when Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, and they actually activated us and put us into Washington to help the local police, not knowing I'd be a policeman at the time, but we had to help them because there was a lot of rioting going on, and they didn't have enough manpower to stop it, so we went in for a couple weeks. Once I got out of the military, I took advantage of the GI Bill and went back to college. I'm originally from Buffalo, New York. I went to the University of Buffalo, and I always wanted to be a physical education teacher, so I got a BS degree in physical education. But because of the Vietnam War, and people was, you know, that was the war was ending up, and a lot of veterans were coming out. There was a lot of people like me that were trying to become physical education teachers, and the job market was saturated. So I had an opportunity to take a test, a civil service test, to be a police officer. And the first job that I had was with the Niagara Falls Police, starting in 1973. And I was there until 1976 when they laid us off because they had overextended when they built a convention center. Now, yeah, you know, they took away all the tax base, and they hired us because they thought the convention center would bring in more tourists, but then they realized they didn't have enough money to pay us. But I would like to add, this is an interesting part of my background. I actually got to meet Elvis Presley in person and talk with Elvis Presley.
Really?
Yeah, because the opening act of the convention center was Elvis Presley. And I wish I had more time to tell you about that. Maybe later I'll tell you, but that was one of the most exciting things in my whole career, meeting Elvis. So once they laid us off, I found out they were hiring down here in Texas. And of course, being from Buffalo, it was February when I came down here, so you know what the weather's like up there in February. And I came down here, and it was like 70 degrees. So I made a mental note, if they hire me down here, I'm coming. So I got fortunate, I was blessed, and they hired me. And I started the following September with the Houston Police. I started in 1976 in September, and I was with them until 2008 was when I retired with the Houston Police. Now I was always a patrolman with the Houston Police, but I also, for 17 years, was on the SWAT team, which is where I developed a lot of experience from dealing with major problems in our community, and, you know, barricaded suspects and suicidal attempts, and there was a plethora of problems that they call the SWAT team for. And I was also blessed because I had an education background that they eventually made me the training coordinator, so I was helpful in doing SWAT training for not only our agency but agencies from all around the state. And from that experience, they used us towards the tail end of my career in SWAT to help found the domestic violence unit for the Houston Police. And It was at the time when they had changed the law. Earlier in my career, anytime there's a domestic violence, you had to get cooperation from the victims, but they realized that the victims were always afraid for one reason or another, and they would never cooperate. So they changed the law in the late 80s, early 90s, to where we had to, where we could make the decision. If we felt there's probable cause that the women had been abused, they didn't have to cooperate. You know, we'd just tell them, look, you're under arrest because we know you assaulted a woman. And then I was really blessed to be able to teach in the first, when they changed the law, we had to have a year-long in-service training of 8 hours for every officer. And because I was the man, they wanted me to teach, because there's a lot of men in there that, you know, they get objection because they think we're just picking on the men. And I probably learned more teaching that class than I would have if I hadn't taught it. But it was very, it inspired me so much that that's when I finally decided I had to do something more. And in 1992, I actually filed to run for sheriff to help stop this problem. And I actually ran as a Democrat the first time out. I'm a Republican candidate now, but I ran because the current sheriff had switched parties. He'd been a Democrat, and he switched to the Republican Party, so it would have been easier for me to win the primary, which I did win that primary in a runoff.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. So anyways, it's difficult to give you my background because it's so extensive, so I'm trying to fast forward it. I actually worked in the family violence unit when we first formed it, even though I was still on the SWAT team. And I'm the proudest of that time of my career, because we had developed a system. It was like a triage. We had a family violence counselor. We had personnel, and actually the current sheriff, Ed Gonzalez, actually worked there as a civilian because he was bilingual, and he came in a mentor program, and he actually worked taking statements from people that couldn't speak English. And then they would give the police officers the statements, and then we would talk to the victims, and then we'd go file the warrants on the women or on the men that had abused and sometimes it was a woman even. You know, if a woman had abused a man, it was the same thing. But we had a system where sometimes within 24 hours of the assault, we could have the people in jail, and I felt very rewarded that we could do that. So from that is why I decided to run for sheriff. Well, I won the primary but lost the general election, and then in 1994, I've been a Christian all my life, but I actually had a born-again experience where I surrendered my life to Jesus Christ, and then I realized I'm really on a mission from God to try to help stop dysfunctioning families, basically.
So this is your calling.
Yeah. Without a doubt, I believe it's my calling, because I was called to be a policeman even before I knew it. God gave me the skills to have empathy and compassion. And I think I mentioned earlier to you, my dad was also a Cattaraugus County sheriff up in western New York, and he would have me take me on. I never thought at the time I'd be a police officer, because I was kind of a troubled kid myself. I'm lucky I didn't go to prison in those days, but I made it through that, and God knew what He had created me for. And but once I got saved and started reading the Word of God, then I really realized that, yeah, this is where God wants me to be. I can help people by taking care of the problems that they call us for, but also maybe leading them into a more spiritual background to where they can. And you know, most people we deal with have a spiritual background, but they kind of went one way or the other. And so I continued in 1996, 2000, 2004, 2008. Well, I'm still with Houston Police, and I'm not winning any primaries now because I'm running as a Republican. I'm running against incumbents. And in 2008, when I got defeated, I was a little discouraged. So I decided, you know, this is it. I'm just retiring. But God wouldn't let me off the hook. and so I did retire for a year. I went up and became assistant coach because I always wanted to be a coach. My oldest son became a coach. And I'm proud to say that right now he's a Hall of Fame high school football coach in the state of Missouri. And then my two younger sons actually became police officers. I have one here in the Houston Police. Matter of fact, he just called me today. He was in a high-speed chase for like 15 minutes to where the guy had burglarized a car and then took off running. They caught him, thank God. And so I'm proud of him. But then I have a son up in Erie. It's in Erie County, the county surrounding Buffalo, that's on a narcotics squad up there working for the sheriff's office. And I have a daughter-in-law who is a small-town cop, and she's a sexual assault investigator. And again, I'm proud of my family. They just had their 5th child. Brooklyn Lynette, and they named the child after his mother because his mother just passed. So anyway, we got a lot of background in law enforcement in my family, and so after I retired, I actually came back and took the physical training test with the sheriff's office, and I've been there for now almost 11 years, and that, all the time, I hate to lose. You know, every time I would lose an election, I think, Lord, what are you doing to me? You know, you keep telling me that this is where I should be, but I never made it. Well, he knew that I needed more experience with the county because I was with HPD. I had a big heart, but I just needed to be with the county and see what all the problems were. And now I've got a lot of support within the county. Even a retired captain now, Captain Jay Coons, is endorsing me because I worked for him and he saw what my heart was, and he knows that I want to do what's best for the Harris County Sheriff.
Well, you're running against, I guess, Ed Gonzalez.
Yes.
What are some of the changes that you would make as sheriff, or why is it that you feel that we need to change?
Well, the first thing I would do is we have to completely reorganize it because there's way too many bureaus and divisions. And I'll just use the human trafficking as an example. Human trafficking is Houston, Harris County, Texas is the hub of human trafficking in the whole world. I was at a seminar where they said there's over 70,000 human trafficking victims in Texas alone. And people who think of human trafficking, they think it's people being brought in from other countries. That's not the case at all. It's all our little runaway girls here that are being taken by gangsters and turning them into prostitutes and putting them in fear of the death of themselves or their families if they don't continue doing it. So we have a major problem, and the Harris County Sheriff's only has 2 and maybe 3. I heard lately that they've increased it to 3, but only 3 investigators and 1 sergeant. And we're the largest human trafficking area in the country. Houston Police has, I think, 10 or 15, which is much more efficient. But as soon as I become sheriff, I'm going to try to bring. There's 56 agencies in Harris County. I'm going to try to get with all of their chief administrators, maybe put together a task force like my son is in Erie County, and maybe have 100 people work in human trafficking. And I also have been endorsed by Kristen Stillwell, who's from the Hope Haven. They rescue human trafficking victims and try to get them on track, which is very difficult. And that's just one problem. You want to know the biggest problem in the sheriff's office? The lack of manpower. And so we have to figure out how to get more manpower out there. I currently work with the in District 1, which is the substation off of Cypresswood, 6831 Cypresswood. Some days we go to work with maybe 7 to 8 deputies for that whole area, which covers a large mass of. It's like the size of a big city, maybe the size of Pasadena. We just don't have enough people to handle the calls. One thing we can do, and this is not going to be popular with the constables, but the constables are right now getting a lot of our pay slots that they really can't justify. We're supposed to have them, but for some reason they've been giving them to them. And I would try to, through the Commissioner's Court, try to make sure that we get some of them back so we could have a more efficiently run patrol division. But then even if we had patrolmen, we don't have enough people in the Detective Bureau. The Human Trafficking and Vice, they're even separate. They have a Vice Division and Human Trafficking. They should be all together.
So you bring up an issue here that I want to ask you about. What is the relationship? And I know I've heard people who've asked this question. They didn't understand this. What's the relationship between law enforcement, the constables versus the sheriff? What is the relationship in the county between those two organizations?
Well, I can explain the way they operate. The sheriff is, and most people don't realize it, I don't think any sheriff in my whole time in Harris County's taken the initiative to exercise his authority. You're the main law enforcement officer over the whole county. We should be coordinating all law enforcement efforts. The constables are in, like Precinct 4 is our area, is Mark Herman. They do a good job. I'm not criticizing what they do, but all their manpower is usually utilized in contracts, which are paid for by the individual areas and homeowners. And then the sheriff has to handle all the calls that aren't in these contracts. And of course, the sheriff has some contracts. We have a good working relationship because we're all that you have deputy constables and deputy sheriffs. We work together. I have no problem. A lot of, when Ron Hickman was sheriff, a lot of people came from Precinct 4, and they can just lateral over. We're all peace officers, and most of them do a good job. You know, everybody knows not everybody does a good job because we have some that get in trouble, but the overwhelming average of police officers do the best they can to perform services for the community and keep it safe. But what would probably occur when I become sheriff is I will probably, the elected constables probably won't like the fact that I want to get back some of the pay slots I believe that the sheriff should have because we actually have the responsibility of protecting the whole county. Even the Houston police take care of Houston, but we could go and help them in the city, which we do a lot, but they don't have the capabilities to come out in the county because of the technology. And that's one thing I'd like to correct too. I'd like to get us all on the same, every agency in Harris County should be on the same computer database so that we can all do reports and we can cross-reference cases. And as a sheriff, it's almost like putting together a chamber of commerce of all the administrations of the 56 different agencies. And then if you throw in there, you know, every school district has they have their own law enforcement agents. Like we got Spring ISD and Klein ISD and Aldine ISD out where I patrol. And here's another thing. You know that the sheriff doesn't even have a juvenile division? And I, coming from HPD, they have an excellent juvenile division where if you get a juvenile, you can take them there and you file the charges on them, but then they take care of processing them if they have to go to juvenile probation. You know, what we have to do in the county, and I'm thankful for this, is whenever I get a juvenile suspect, I usually take them to Spring ISD because that's close. They have a real good system because that's what they deal with is juveniles. They have separate rooms you can put them in. They have the automated fingerprinting system where they will come in. We have a very good working relationship with the school districts. They'll always come in, they'll fingerprint them for us, and they're more natural to work with juveniles because they work with them all the time.
So it sounds like you're talking about the lack of manpower in domestic violence. You're talking about the lack of manpower in juvenile division. It sounds like one of the things that you see is that the Harris County, 6.5 million people in the greater metropolitan area, but as far as the sheriff's department is concerned, very strapped for resources.
Yes. Very much so, and as manpower, and we haven't even talked about the jail. I mean, the jail is a whole other beast.
Right. That's all overcrowding is a perpetual issue, right?
Well, it's overcrowding, but if you want to throw in the problems with the district attorney's office now, and my son will tell you a horror story every day. I don't arrest as many as he does, but he works inner city, and almost every day he gets problems with them keeping people in jail. Their idea is to have a low bond and let them out so they don't have to stay in the jail saying they're saving money, and they save money because they don't have the resources to watch them. So the census in the jail, I don't know what it is, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but it used to be anywhere from 8, 10, 12,000, and I think the capability is around 11,000 for Harris County, but now they're letting everybody out on low bonds, and so they're not staying in jail, and what do you think they're doing when they get out? They go out and commit more crimes. But when the jail is at capacity, the whole time I've been with the sheriff's office, they've always had an overtime program for the detention officers and the peace officers that work there because they don't have enough people to work all the shifts.
Yeah. But it is a real conundrum, as you say,
yes.
is juggling this, right? Is you don't want to spend a lot of time on people who shouldn't be in lockup, but at the same time, you don't know who is going to commit another crime if they're let out on too low a bond. And so that's something...
Exactly. And I'll just use my son as an example. The last 2 days, he caught someone yesterday with a crack pipe, and he recognized him as a guy that he thought was trying to carjack him about a month earlier when he was off duty. And the guy ran from him. He found some crack, and he filed the charge on him. And by the time... he always checks up on him. They dismissed the crack case, saying he didn't have enough probable cause, even after the guy ran from him, after he saw him make the transaction. And now he's released this guy on a $1,000 bond, but he has over, I think, 16 or 17 felony convictions, which means he should have been held, and maybe you could even file on him for habitual criminal. If you have more than 2 felony convictions, here comes another felony, and plus an evading arrest, which was... he had other evading arrests. I mean, this guy should be kept in jail, but they let him go. And now what he had to do today was he had to refile the charge and show the fact that he didn't show the guy was riding a bicycle the wrong way. That's what the probable cause they wanted, rather than the fact he ran from the police when they tried to stop him. Today he had a high-speed chase for 15 minutes, and I think this guy had multiple evading arrests and multiple burglary of motor vehicles, and that's what the guy was running from. And both of these guys were in their mid-40s. So when Paul Day becomes sheriff, and I'll promote Mary Ann Huffman too, because I've spoken with her. I think she's the one that should be elected district attorney. And we've already talked about this. We'll have a process. When all these 56 agencies come through the Harris County Jail, we know what all of them are charged with. And I can assign a special unit in there to pick up cases where they have multiple convictions in felonies. Mary Ann's already agreed that she'll work with us. We'll have a district attorney there. And when we get district court judges in there that are more conservative like we are, I believe we can have a habitual criminal court. That all these habitual criminals go to that court and justify high bonds because they keep committing crimes. We keep them in jail, and once they get convicted, they get 20 years to life. And I'm a big one, and I want to be real transparent too. So I'm not gonna sneak up on everybody. We're going to publicize we're doing this, both in English and in Spanish, and then they're going to know that if you get caught and you're a lifetime criminal, that you could end up getting life in prison.
We've got a few more minutes left, and so I want to give you one more chance to tell the voters, why is Paul Day the best candidate, and where can they learn more about your campaign?
Thank you very much. I'm glad you asked that. I'm the best candidate this time because of my 45 years of experience in 3 different agencies. I was a sergeant in the military, so I had some administrative experience, but I've also helped organize. I helped put together the SWAT training schools, and I also helped put together the domestic violence unit, and I also train. So I'm a good I believe in training. But I would ask everybody to compare me to my 2 opponents. And actually, there's 5 opponents that they got 3 in the Democratic Party, and then they got 2 here, and I have much more experience than any of them. The fact that I haven't given up, and I really believe that God's called me for this, and I believe that if you just looked at my experience compared to my opponents, and there's 2 places you can go to. You can go to my webpage, which is pauldayforsheriff.com, and it's got everything in there that I talked about and more, and all the plans we have. But I also was interviewed by the conservative Coalition of Harris County, and I would really appreciate if everybody watching would go there, because I read my responses compared to my 2 opponents' responses, and once they read that, it'll be very obvious they should vote for me. And the last thing I'm going to ask everybody is I've already told you I'm a Christian, so I'm going to quote Solomon, who God said would be the wisest man ever to live, and it's from Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. And I love this scripture, and I'll challenge all of you to go and read it and then live it. It says, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean on your understanding, in all your ways acknowledge Him. And then this is why I know we're going to win. Because then He says, and then I will direct your paths. And I know that He's going to, if you do that and you pray about this, He will definitely direct your paths to vote for the right people. Not just me, but all the right people.
And we also want to point out that this time around, you can't just check a box, right?
Yes.
People are going to have to vote down the ballot.
Yes. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because people get confused. Mm-hmm. This is the Republican primary, so even if you wanted to vote the D or the R, you couldn't do it here. You have to go all the way down, and we're down at the bottom. Myself and Mary Ann Huffman, and even I've listened to the county chair. He always says, I'm the last one on the bottom. I'm on the second to the last page. But go all the way down, and don't vote for anybody you don't know about, and do your research and make sure you vote for the best candidates. And I've already told Mr. Pruce and one of your associates out there, but the League of Women Voters is the best resource for you to find out who your best candidates are, because they don't charge us anything. They give us these opportunities to go to all the voters. And even the young lady I was talking to out there, I was impressed. She works with the immigrants who get their citizenship, and they register all of them to vote. And that's what this country's all about. You need to go out, but what worries me is when people vote and they don't know who they're voting for.
Right, right. Well, we thank you very much. And we do have a voter's guide. And I also, another thing about the election, we are in early voting right
Yes.
now. And on Saturday, February 22nd, Metro is offering free rides to people to go and vote. Also on Election Day, Super Tuesday. So please get out and vote. And as Mr. Day has said here, we do want you to be educated voters, and that's why we're here tonight. I want to thank you for your time. Actually, you know, I was jotting down some notes here. You've got a great story. I'd love to talk to you more, and hopefully we can sit down and visit again.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
And thank you very much.
We'll be back in just a few minutes with Republican candidates for tax assessor collector coming up in just a minute. Hi, welcome once again to Conversations with the Candidates with the League of Women Voters of Houston here at Houston Media Source TV. I'm Gene Preuss, and we are going to talk with the Republican candidate for tax assessor collector, Chris Daniels. And thank you very much for being on the show. I just want to let you and everybody else know, we open these up to everyone, all the candidates, but because candidates have other obligations and stuff, they can't always make it. I'm not saying you didn't, but thank you for putting this on your calendar and agreeing to be with us tonight.
Absolutely. I owe it to Linda because I missed being on this segment when I was running for re-election for district clerk. And so even though I'm unopposed in the Republican primary and have, by voting for myself, effectively won that primary, it is an honor to support the league and to support the voters out there who are going to be listening and preparing for November.
Right. And, you know, the nice thing is they may be watching on Facebook Live, so right. I'm going to try to get everything correct. and not make any mistakes. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Why are you running for a tax assessor collector?
Well, I'm a native Houstonian, Eagle Scout, married, 2 kids, engineer, lawyer, and have been elected to 2 different offices. This would be my 3rd office. Every office I've run for, I've been asked to run for. The first office was Lone Star College, and at the time it was North Harris Montgomery Community College District for you native Houstonians. My sister was starting off at Cy-Fair College and had trouble. And at that time I was recently graduated from college and knew the differences between various community colleges and how hard it should be to register, and thought it was ridiculous she was having a hard time. So I ran, defeated the board president, and served 4.5 years of a 6-year term, serving under Randy Bates, who was chairman at the time, and as a bipartisan board, we boomed that district. It's now one of the largest, best community college districts in the state of Texas, growing fast. It's still cheaper than heck, one of the best deals in town, and we're darn proud of the work that we did as a bipartisan board for Lone Star College System. I was then asked to run for district clerk. That office had been taken over by the Democrats in the swing of 2008. There was a good gentleman that was in there, and they asked for a good Republican to match him. And we were equal in age, went to the same school, same background, and so in that match, he came in on a wave, he went out on a wave, and that's eventually what happened to me after 8 years as your Harris County District Clerk, where we boomed technology, basically revolutionizing the courthouse, revolutionizing jury duty, best ever stats across the board. We ended up being swept out by the 2018 wave. And in this cycle, I was asked to run for Harris County Tax Assessor Collector because of the technology that we brought into the District Clerk's office. And if we can revolutionize that office and make it one of the best across the state, and mind you, Harris County is the largest county in the state and is larger than 26 other states in population. Imagine what we can do with the tax office in saving taxpayer money, increasing technology, and making for a better overall customer service.
So let me ask you a couple of questions. And
sure.
Mike Sullivan used to be tax assessor collector.
Yes, a great tax assessor collector.
And a nice fellow.
Yeah.
And so
he's
I
currently on the board for Lone Star College.
All right, you guys switched places. I think. So he, one of the things that people would often ask him, and I know that when I talk to him, is that what is it exactly that you do? Everybody thinks, or there's a popular that you guys go around knocking on door for taxes. That's part of your job. Right. But what role do you see you taking as the tax assessor collector if elected?
So not only do you handle the property taxes, as also for collecting for certain districts like school districts and MUD districts, special purpose districts, but you also handle auto registration and you handle voter registration. Most people who are not familiar with the tax office through property taxes or auto are familiar because of voter registration. And for one way or another, they want to have that right to vote. They want to have that voice. And so they will touch and concern whoever is the tax assessor collector. And we've had a great many of them here in Harris County.
So I am licensed, or I have a certificate from the tax assessor collector's office to be a registrar.
Great.
And so that means it's not really a tough job, but it is an important role. And as a part of the League of Women Voters, we see your office, that office, as something very important. So besides, what is it about the tax? So nobody likes paying taxes. Everybody challenges. What do people need to know about your office if you get elected?
What they would need to know if I got elected is that they would have much better customer service, that they would have the possibility of online voter registration that has never really happened in the state of Texas. We had online voter registration at the college level for student elections going all the way back to 2000 at the University of Texas. We are in 2020. And in 2020, we should be able to approach the legislature, approach both sides of the aisle, and work out a way to have effective online voter registration so that we can not only keep people up to date on where they moved to and where they've changed their name to, or et cetera, but also make it to where we have state-of-the-art, effective, up-to-date voter registration poll books.
So let me just throw this out here, just to elicit your response. So people are going to say, look, we don't want what happened in Iowa, caucuses to happen here. How can we have? I mean, people are concerned about electronic voting, and it hasn't been very easy. So, how would you address these
So the difference
questions?
between voter registration and online voting is that in voter registration, we're just collecting your data to make sure that you can register to vote and have the ability to then go to a poll, versus online voting, where that can be actually hacked. In this case, the goal is to have that option so that we can touch and concern as many people as possible. If you make it easy for them to register to vote, they will likely do so. That was the beauty of Motor Voter, which unfortunately with the lines at DPS has basically been obliterated, because most people will go online to renew their driver's license instead of stand in any of those abysmal lines. But when they do, though, they deprive themselves the right to automatically re-register to vote. And so people who are going online to register for a new driver's license, they can get that application in the mail, and they may or may not fill it out, and they may or may not turn it in, versus being able to instantly do it at a DMV. Once the state fixes the DMVs, that issue will resolve itself. But with online voter registration, we don't even have to have that question. And so that is one major topic that I'm campaigning on, that I don't believe the other two candidates are on the, or three candidates on the Democrat side are even touching. Why? As the engineer, as the proven technology guru for the courts, we have tested and tested and tested and piloted and piloted and piloted many different mandates that came down from the Supreme Court, that came down through federal edicts, that came out through legislative changes that had to be made. And through that, we were able to implement online courts for civil, family, criminal, as well as making it easier, faster, better for the attorneys to file their lawsuits and for the public to access their taxpayer paid for court records. And so we can do the same through tried and true engineered practices for online voter registration, as well as many other aspects of the tax office. Imagine what we could do to cut down on the kiosks that are happening when you go to a branch location. Right now, people pick and choose which branch location to go to based on the customer service they've historically received at that location. They know maybe not to go to this branch, but to go to that branch. Or don't go to that branch on Wednesday, go to that branch on Tuesday, because so-and-so will be there. That shouldn't be the case. You should have the best consistent customer service across all the branches as well as downtown.
Well, it sounds like a interesting update to the office. What are some of the other problems you see in the office that you would address?
Well, I made the case against Ann Harris Bennett, who is the incumbent right now. If any of her opponents should win the primary in the Democrat side, then we'll address that at a later League of Women Voter taping, hopefully. But we have errors in billing. For example, if you are a small automobile dealership, you may be getting wrong bills or have gotten wrong bills and then have gotten interest and penalties assessed, even though you've already paid the correct bill that you had already called in advance about because you're a good businessman. And so we have not only errors with that, but we also have errors in property taxes with regards to special purpose districts. This should be a gimme for the tax office. The special purpose districts, that's your MUD districts, your utility districts, your navigation districts. There's over 20 different special purpose districts in the state of Texas. These can sometimes be in the purview of the tax office, or they can independently have their hired own tax assessor collector. When this is the case, this should be an easy task for the office to handle. And already we're seeing issues in the Champions area where the tax assessor collector is not properly pulling up billing statements and not properly assessing the taxes for those areas. That results in lost revenue for the county, which results in the need to ask for higher property taxes by the current Commissioner's Court from everyone else. There's issues with the lines that I've mentioned already. There's issues with, there's errors with voter registration. For example, there's now over 5,000 people registered to vote at P.O. boxes. Now, understand why most people would register at a P.O. box. They're either trying to hide from creditors, trying to hide from an abusive spouse, or they're trying to have some sort of anonymity. And you're allowed to have your voter registration card sent to a P.O. box, but you do not live in a P.O. box. There is no legal way that you could possibly fit in those small boxes, either at a post office or at a private P.O. box at a UPS store, et cetera, et cetera. Yet there are over 5,000 confirmed voters on the rolls right now that are registered, not getting a card mailed to a box, registered at a P.O. box, and that's against the law. There's incorrect district lines. For example, in Pasadena, for 3 separate election cycles, they've had the wrong district lines, and that impacts the local elections for city council for Pasadena, as an example, for mayor of Pasadena. And when people aren't able to vote in the right spots, that means they're being left off the voter rolls for that district race and only allowed to vote provisionally or in error at their precinct for just the rest of the candidates and not their specific district bond races, city council races, school board races that might actually have a severe impact on their day-to-day lives. There's incorrect voter data. For example, in this election cycle alone, and this is what these other documents are in front of me, we have poll books that are in error at the early voting locations. They are the 4th version before in correctness, meaning that these were data from May, and we've had 4 elections since then where people have either changed their name, turned 18 and registered to vote, moved, or all the above. And these poll books have been in error for a day and a half now. This happened earlier in November, where they took the county clerk who handles the actual running of elections 3 days to fix this. But as the tax assessor collector, you can take a proactive approach, much like Leo Vasquez did, much like Paul Betancourt did, much like Mike Sullivan did, in making sure that the data coming from the tax office is being properly reconciled with the data coming from the county clerk's office, so that nobody's being disenfranchised, nobody's being forced to vote provisional, and nobody's being turned away at the polls. We have not only that, but we have improper reconciliation of the district clerk jury duty roles. What does that mean? When you get summoned for jury duty, you have the option to tell the person there that you're not a citizen, that you don't live in the county, that you have a felony or some other disqualifier that makes it to where you are not legally eligible to serve on that jury role for whatever reason. That needs to be properly reconciled with the voter rolls, because if you say you don't live in Harris County, you live in Fort Bend County, you live in Brazoria County, Pearland, you have no right to vote in a Harris County election. So what business is it with Ann Harris Bennett to keep you on the roll and give you a valid voter registration card for this election? We have students that live in Austin who are registered to vote in Travis County who yet are still receiving voter registration cards at their parents' home. This is wrong. This opens the door to fraud, and when people are aware of it, they can take advantage of it, and that ruins the integrity of the elections. People talk about the Iowa caucuses. You mentioned it earlier in this broadcast. This is a severe issue that needs to be handled immediately with regard to the integrity of the voter registration poll books that are at the early voting locations right now.
So this was an issue when I was going to college many
Right.
years ago in the 80s, is that sometimes people did register in both places.
Right.
You would think that by 2020,
Yes.
we would have computer systems that would stop that, right?
And reconcile, yes.
Does that exist?
The technology's already there. It's been there. If you were to talk to any audit company, any Deloitte & Touche, Grant Thornton, KPMG, or Ernst & Young, any of these large audit companies, and you see them when they do the Academy Awards or the Tonys or whatever. These audit companies have the software in place to reconcile this kind of stuff so that you are not having people that are registering to vote in multiple locations, either on error or on purpose, and to stop this kind of fraud. Usually in error, but regardless, the integrity of the right to vote is paramount. We want to make sure that every vote counts and that nobody is being disenfranchised one way or the other, Democrat or Republican. And so she's had 4 years as the incumbent to implement any kind of technology. The best she could do was a modified kiosk system to try to handle the line situation that had developed at the tax assessor collector branch locations. These kiosk systems are confusing at best. They're color-coded. They don't make any sense. There's no key or guide for the public that are sitting down to know why they're getting Q109 versus K103 versus C99. What does that even mean? why they're there, and how long is it really going to take for them to be seen by a person at the branch location. Never mind the fact that at certain branch locations, they may only do 2 transactions an hour before they have to balance their books and balance the cash transactions, which is totally inefficient, a waste of taxpayer time, waste of taxpayer money, and one of the reasons why every district clerk, including my Democrat predecessor, worked so hard to make customer service paramount at the district clerk's office, why Mike Sullivan, why Leo Vasquez, why Paul Betancourt, Don Sumners worked so hard on customer service at the tax office, and it needs to come back. We have the technology to do this. We have the technology to streamline customer service and to make better searchable fields so that when you're not at a branch location, you can easily search for what's needed and wanted, at whether it's looking for a VUID, a voter unique identifier, or whether you're looking for some sort of property information, or whether you're just looking for research about the tax assessor collector.
So you've run for several offices.
Yes.
Have you always brought efficiency as a paramount issue?
No, when I ran for Lone Star College, the issue there was thinking outside the box and thinking in terms of the role of the student. There I was, yes, we talked about efficiency, but that wasn't the main goal. The main goal was saving taxpayer money and doing what was best for the students. So how we saved taxpayer money was by streamlining services at the various campuses. And how we did what was best for the student is we put ourselves for the first time as a board in the shoes of the student. What would you want if you were a student when you're registering for classes? What do you want if you're a student trying to attend classes? Is the purpose that you are a second career person or a first in your generation to go to college? Do you need more night classes? Do you need more day classes? Do you need more core classes so you can transfer to U of H or to TSU or to any other local? At that time there were 6, they're now up to 9 affiliated universities with Lone Star College. Or are you into the trades? Are you already in a career and need that special extra training to keep licensed with your trade? All this had to be surveyed, all this had to be put onto the shoes of the board members so that we could see the viewpoint of a student and then go from there. And that's how we ended up with something revolutionary like online textbooks. At that time, you had to spend a fortune, almost double your tuition in books. And for the first time, we finally had online textbooks saving a fortune for those students. That is an example of efficiency, but it wasn't the purpose. The purpose was to save money for the student, for the school, and to make it better for the student as an overall experience. Same thing with the district clerk's office. We put ourselves in the shoes of the lawyer, but not just the lawyer, because my predecessor was good at that part. Also the public. What does the public want? With regard to free background checks, with regard to being able to reschedule jury duty, with regard to being able to search for cases, personal cases like maybe a family member's criminal case or your personal divorce or a civil matter where you're having to sue a former business partner of some kind. You need to be able to view those records securely, easily, and fast, especially at a remote location. And putting yourself in the shoes of the taxpayer, we were able to revolutionize a lot of the customer service experience in that office. So the next step for the tax assessor collector's office to save taxpayer money, to increase efficiency, and to get a better overall experience for the voter is for the first time in 4 years, have the tax assessor collector put themselves in the shoes of the citizen, of the resident, of the taxpayer, of the non-taxpayer, so that they have the viewpoints of all these people who interact with every one of those branch locations and the downtown location and be able to get a better customer service experience overall.
So I'm going to tell you what I hear.
Yeah.
I do hear a common theme here, and correct me if I'm wrong because I don't want to put words in your mouth. You're the candidate.
Yes,
I do hear that this idea, you want to make, in all of these offices that you've held, you're looking to make for better customer service,
yeah,
so that the average taxpayer is going to have an easier time and not as much bureaucracy.
Yes, cut through the red tape, cut through the lines, cut through the busy work, so that you get to point A to point B much faster. We can do that with technology. We can do that with an audit of all the departments to see where the best practices are, where the bottlenecks are, where can we streamline things. That's as how you put on your hat as an engineer to figure out how these things can flow better. Not necessarily to eliminate positions, but to reroute positions so that they're in a better spot so that the lines flow better. It's not necessarily about cutting jobs or cutting the budget. It's about rerouting everything so that it goes faster, better, easier for everybody, regardless of race, color, or creed, or party affiliation. And what I was known for as the district clerk, it didn't matter who you were when you walked in the door. We made sure that regardless of where you lived or who you were or who you voted for, that you got the best customer service possible from that clerk sitting in front of you.
So what do you think is the biggest challenge you're going to face if you get elected? What are you going to do the first 90 days?
So the first 90 days, we have to do, again, a complete audit of the office to find out where all the bugs are, where all the kinks are. The next thing is we have to basically find out what's needed and wanted from not only the existing employees that are there, but from the department heads that interact with the office. And then from there, we do a complete survey on the customers coming in and out of the door so that we can get their ideas and see their viewpoint on what's happening when they interact with the office. And so I hope within the first 90 days that we're able to not only do a full overhaul of the office without eliminating a position. We hardly got rid of anybody when I came in as district clerk, but instead refocus the technology so that we are doing better, faster, easier, saving taxpayer money. I can't say that enough for the citizens that are coming to interact with the tax office.
So we have about 5 minutes left in that time. In that time.
Yeah.
Again, why are you the best candidate, and where can people go to find out more information about your campaign?
Glad you asked. Why I'm the best candidate is I have my proven track record. Ann Harris-Bennett, who is the incumbent right now, is a former employee of mine who worked for me because she was let off egregiously and needed time to fill the gap for retirement. She was a former clerk, served well as an employee under Ray Hardy, under Charles Baccaris, and was honored to have her as an employee. She lucked out in getting into this role, and it shows. She's not a bad person, but there are far more qualified people to take the reins and not just be a custodian of the office, but to actually improve it. As this Eagle Scout will do, we will leave it better than we found it. Where people can find out more information about my campaign, Chris Daniel for Tax Assessor Collector, is at www.chrisdaniel.org, on Facebook at Daniel4Tax, or on Twitter, Daniel4Tax. And as, again, a pro-technology person, we are going to have a YouTube channel. We're going to have many ways for the public to interact, not only with me as a candidate, but I was one of the most accessible district clerks ever in the state of Texas. And we will continue that trend as your tax assessor collector so that you can personally get a hold of me should there ever be a bottleneck or should there ever be an issue.
All right. Well, very good. So let me ask you a question. You've run
Sure.
for several offices.
Yeah.
Does your wife ever say, when are you going to stop being a politician?
She loves the fact that I like to serve. She sees the passion in my eyes whenever I give back, whenever I help. Where I derive that passion is when my father was killed by a drunk driver at a very young age for me, the Boy Scouts stepped up, family stepped up, friends stepped up, neighbors stepped up, and I feel like I owe a debt to Houston as a community, Harris County as a community, to give back. And that's never going to be repaid. That's where the passion for service comes from. And the only reason why I'm not your district clerk now is because of political waves. I'd still be serving in that capacity. I'd be honored to be your tax assessor collector, to bring technology, to bring efficiency, to save taxpayer money, to bring that passion for service. Regardless of who else is serving in county government, I work well with everyone. I have that proven track record. I don't care who you are. I'm going to give you personally the best service possible or interact with your office or your team possible because that's what's in the best interest for the greater good.
Well, Chris Daniel, thank you so much for coming down and for taking time out of your schedule. I know we're in the last couple of weeks before Super Tuesday,
Sure.
and we're in early voting, so it's crunch time, and you know you have a lot of obligations. So thank you very much. If you'd like to learn more about the League of Women Voters, go to our website. lwvhouston.org, and we also have a 411 page, 411, so you can find out more information about all the candidates. Unfortunately, I wish we could had all the time in the world because we can interview candidates. There's a lot of people running in many different campaigns going on, and you'll see that whenever you go to vote. We have another show coming up here at 8 o'clock tonight. We'll have Democratic candidates. We've invited them for Harris County Sheriff. I'm Gene Preuss for the League of Women Voters of the Houston area, and thank you very much for joining us with conversation on the candidates on Houston Media Source TV. Thank you.
Thank you.